It's no surprise that Arc Raiders is in a bit of a content drought. While we had a new event and project introduced to last us another month or so last week, it's not exactly the game-changing content or updates that will hook you in another way other than just logging in and trying to acquire specific items. This appears to be the basis for what we'll see going forward, and when it comes to the content updates in the near future, as detailed by the patch notes last week as we gear up for and await that upcoming Frozen Trails update in October. But while we have a bit of a drought going, we're starting to see glimpses of what could be in the way of the Chinese client and beta for Arc Raiders as more and more details and footage start to come out for that. Today I wanted to run down a bit of what they've been cooking up, some good additions, and potential to see that for ourselves in the global client. So drop your thoughts as we go along, drop a like if you enjoy the video, and make sure to subscribe to the video with all things Arc Raiders and more FPS content. I'd love to have in the community. And finally, check out my friends over at Advanced GG, where code Espresso can get 10% off your entire order, but more on that a little later. For now, let's get into it. So we've briefly touched on this before, how about the Chinese region has its own specific version of the game being built. This isn't something that's necessarily new for the gaming landscape or market as a whole. In fact, the Finals actually has done this as well most recently from the Embark IP. Now, probably the most notable things that we've seen recently discussed and leaked was recent modes that have been introduced into this Chinese client and the beta that is currently ongoing. We had things like the dual bosses mode, which will end up seeing you as the raiders taking on both the matriarch and the queen simultaneously, all within the same map. This being something that now recent footage has actually showcased that it's a lot closer together than you may have actually anticipated. The footage showcased on Spaceport features both the queen and the matriarch all right there at the base of the launch tower itself, so all in a very tight vicinity, offering up a big threat from just the environment, let alone the other raiders that may be out there as well, because this is not a PvE mode, so it is still something that somebody can end up taking you out, even though you may be completely focused on those bosses. Another one recently found was the advanced probes mode. This detailed as the precursor probes have descended on the Rust Belt and are continuously emitting scan pulses underground. Destroying a probe will trigger arc reinforcements, but the high value loot they drop makes the risk completely worthwhile. So this kind of being like a smaller scale, or maybe not necessarily operation style, of the close scrutiny game mode, where you have the sort of probes being assessor-like, where they summon different arcs to protect it, but offering higher tier loot in that same capacity. So while we don't see the close scrutiny mode, this kind of seems to be their way of adding in similar gameplay elements. Then we had the all domain alert, which was our actions have alerted the Ark. Special snitches and aerial patrols have joined the battlefield. More large Ark units are roaming the Rust Belt, and the global threat has escalated. So you have special snitches, and it seems like you're going to see things like roaming convoys of rocketeers in this one here as well. So the wrecked Ark loot, those husks that you end up destroying, apparently have higher increased loot value as well. But again, a smaller deviation, but something that offers a bit more value to it. And of course, the one that probably everybody has come to recognize is the security protocol, the PvE style mode, where it says, with the efforts of raiders, communication relays in this area are temporarily restored. A security protocol has been established to prevent friendly fire among raiders, but remain cautious of threats of those who have severed their connections. So until somebody ends up actually going rogue and decides to sever their connection, it says, you won't be able to give or receive any damage from other raiders. If they are somebody that does sever that connection, though, they're also marked, giving the entire lobby the heads up that somebody has gone rogue and where their general whereabouts are, so that you can be on the lookout for that. Those are, of course, probably the most notable things we've seen leaked. We've also seen other things like the new loadout preset system introduced in the most recent footage to come out of this beta testing, in which it just basically allows you to craft what will be sort of your go-to that you use all the time. So if you die, you can just simply, hey, I'm going to choose this loadout preset, jump right back in. You don't have to take any time to end up adding more things to your loadout before you jump in, saving you probably anywhere from like 1 to 3 minutes of trying to navigate your inventory and decide what you want to take. This just being a blanket opportunity to end up doing that with relative ease. We also saw new gameplay items of the boombox and the stun gun. The boombox just being another musical instrument here with this one, following the same theme that we've heard throughout the last couple of introductions of things like the guitars, the pianos, the recorder, the shaker, that kind of stuff. And the stun gun looks to just be something that is a close proximity shock item. So in terms of thinking about how this will actually be receptive and useful to the gameplay experience, I mean, it might be a very niche use case item, something that you have the opportunity to get, but probably won't use all that much, kind of like the flame spray perhaps. But anyways, beyond that, we of course knew that there were also new cosmetics like weapon skins and things alike to that those are exclusive right now to the Chinese beta. However, the thing with this is that some of this stuff sounds pretty good, right? We could see this happening in the future for us, right? Well, maybe not. One thing that we do have to consider is that, of course, this is the Chinese region exclusive client. This developed by Tencent and its subsidiaries, not by Embark. This is basically just in simplistic terms, kind of like a licensing of this. So like a store owner of a larger franchise, perhaps. That might not even be the best example because the store owner of that probably wouldn't have as much creative freedom as what Tencent and their subsidiaries have compared to a corporation or something that ends up overseeing a menu of a restaurant franchise or something like that. This, though, being entirely disconnected from what we see for the global client of Arc Raiders and the things we see updated weekly with a game that we ourselves have interacted with. Now, the thing is, I say that I think it's both possible and impossible. I think it's just a matter of how things go, because some of this stuff isn't necessarily exclusive in terms of what we've seen so far. So things like loadout presets, let's say. This was talked about for a while. It was something that was on the radar from Embark and had been mentioned throughout different interviews and everything as something that they would like to implement in terms of a quality of life feature for players so they can spend less time in menus and more time topside. This is something that isn't necessarily new in that discussion, and so therefore I think it's still possible we could see this come. Gameplay items like the boombox, Patrick Soderlund, the CEO of Embark, had mentioned many times before that he has plans for the team to introduce more musical instruments, that being one of those situations where in interviews he's even like, the kind of nice thing about being a CEO of this kind of stuff is I love the musical instruments, so I'm saying we're going to do more. He jokingly was in that sort of vein of how we'll see more of these coming, but then things like that PvE style mode, I think it's possible as a map condition eventually. It doesn't set aside too much of a schism when it comes to fragmenting the player base or anything like that, given that it would only be active likely on one map at a time and not necessarily something that is a completely different forked version of the game that doesn't allow for PvP. And things with dual bosses and things like that being leaked months ago in the global build, I think that's certainly possible, along with other elements that we could have here. And as we talked about some of those other things with the Chinese exclusives, things like the advanced probes, that's essentially just a lesser sort of threat or different designation of the close scrutiny mode we have already. So the seeds for all of these ideas have been there and still remain there, but it's just perhaps a matter of timing and if the sort of feedback for these types of things are noted that players want to see this kind of stuff. Therefore, making this what we see so far independent but not necessarily exclusive. Now, will there be exclusive items within the Chinese version of the game? Absolutely. I think right now, one of the things we can probably expect to see is the weapon skins being exclusive to the Chinese version of this, unless for some reason Nexon is really just like, we need to hammer down all kinds of different microtransactions, which hopefully isn't the case, in which we just end up seeing an over-commercialization of the game. But things like that will definitely be there because the Chinese markets have an incredibly different landscape for how they market and handle their revenues for games. So like that kind of stuff is probably going to be one of the bases of the game over there. But as for the other stuff, I don't think it is necessarily needing to be exclusive, but we'll have to wait and see. But that is where we're going to wrap it up. Just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about some stuff that's been coming out the last couple of days that when I see this pop up, I'm like, that looks pretty cool. And I'm sure a lot of people also feel the same way. But the big question turns to, will Embark act on this for the global client? We'll have to wait and see, but let me know your thoughts down below. Now, before we wrap everything up, a quick heads up, we have partnered with my friends over at Advanced GG. Again, as we've mentioned, a bit under the radar the last few months, but now going into the summer, ramping that up more and more. Advanced is the healthier energy supplement option where I use it daily as my comparable cup of coffee. Currently drinking that raspberry lemonade. Magic Rainbow Sherbet's also another one that's one of my favorites, but I'd highly recommend, and we actually co-branded that along with a few other items on their site, like a 26-ounce ice shaker. But love this stuff. If you're looking for a replacement for your own cup of coffee, give it a try. If you decide to give it a go, code Espresso and get 10% off your entire order. But no sweat, appreciate you hearing me out on this. And of course, just checking in on the videos here that you made it this far. But anyways, that's where we're gonna wrap it up. So let me know your thoughts down below. Drop a like if you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe for more Arc Raiders and other FPS content. I'd love to have in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.